there'd be nothing worth celebrating in a certain way. You know, I like the idea as well that that's what death is for. Death is for providing some sort of sense of value to life. So in the same way, human beings in their horror and profound yuckiness are also the things that make it worth writing about. So anyway, my name's Devin. I just finished a record called Empath, which took me better part of a year and a half, and I'm supposed to be doing a guitar clinic, and I find those really difficult because I've got 6 licks, basically. And as a result of that, I've managed to create like 30 records worth of stuff. And I think maybe the best way to start this would be to, now that I've made that introduction, which is a veiled way of saying, holy shit, I'm in front of people again, and I'm actually psychologically not prepared for that yet. So I'm going to keep looking this way, and now I'll look up, and I'll say, why don't we start by a question? Anybody have a question? Maybe that could lead us into guitar-ish type of things. We could ask about, favorite color. We could ask anything. Actually, the less guitar-oriented, the better, please.
Well, I mean, it's going to be a guitar question now you said that.
I know, that's how I roll, buddy.
Mesa Boogie has been a humongous part of your sound live for many, many years. Is that all completely gone now?
No, I mean, and I think a lot of the reason why these products have been a big part of my life is not only the fact that I use them, but I've got relationships with the people there. Like Tim from Mesa Boogie has been like a friend now, forever. And I was at the NAMM show last year, and the amount of people in my world that have become friends that are involved with the industry is such that I end up using things still because we're buddies. You know, I don't need any more gear. I don't need, you need one guitar and you're good to go. But I got way more guitars than anybody should have. But a lot of the reason for that as well is, which we'll get into, this guitar plays a very practical purpose in my creative life. But also, I'm friends with these guys, right? So Mesa Boogie, I use a dual rectifier with a tube screamer in front of it as a clean boost. I use the Maxon OD808, and I like the EL34 tubes in it. And it's really cool, but this last record, so what I did was, I've always wanted to get like the best guitar sound. So I went into the nicest studio in Vancouver, and I had all these companies send these amazing amplifiers, like everyone I could think of, like all these, the EVH ones and the Mesa ones and the Friedman ones and the Soldano, everything. And I set it up with all these cabs, and we went through every cab, and then we found the right preamp and the right mic, and it was, you know, cost a fortune to do that. And then I went home the next day and reamped it through the Axe-Fx. So I think that more than anything else, I just needed to know, right, what it is that I want and what I didn't want. And so, okay, let me just think. Yeah, this is a guitar clinic. I should do guitar stuff. All right, so this here is this 7-string version of this guitar, this Stormbender, that I designed with Framus over the past couple of years, and you can feel free to give it a shot at the end. I don't play 7-string at all, so if you are interested in 7 strings, you should totally buy it, because apparently 7 strings are cool. And I tune in this tuning, so it's open C, and then I have a drop G at the bottom for the 7. So basically, the way that this tuning works, and I haven't actually tuned this, even though it's got the Evertune thing, I just did it by ear, so it's going to be a little out. And I made these weird patches which kind of replicate what I'm trying to do. So let's start by talking about this tuning and how it works. So from low string, it's C, G, C, G, C, E, right? And then in the 7-string thing, you got the G at the bottom. So the reason why this functions so well for me as a singer is because I was saying to the guys before, when I play live, I'll record all the parts in the studio, all the difficult parts. But then live, I try to hire people who are better than me and have them play the parts. And then all I have to do is have the guitar slung low and just go. That's all I really want to do live, right? But the reason why this tuning works so well for me is, as a singer, it's like the perfect solution. So how it functions is bar chords, right? So it's a... And then for crunching, it's just open and just like that. That's all you have to do, right? So like... And when it comes to articulating the intervals that I try and choose, with my music, because I'll have orchestras and choirs and lots of effects and beeps and boops and all these things going on. But the way that I structure the rhythm tracks is I really try and keep it super simple. So a lot of times, you know, like the more complicated things, when you're in a bigger place, like an arena if you're fortunate enough, or a festival. The more complicated and the faster the music gets, the less it translates over big areas. So what I've tried to do rhythmically with a lot of the music is keep what the guitars and bass are doing just dead simple. And I try and keep it octaves and fifths as a result of that. So this is your fifth, and then your octaves in this tuning are just... If you keep the rhythms doing octaves and fifths, you can imply any intervals with the other stuff in a way that the bass, like the foundation of the music, just remains really big. So if you're just going like... So basically, if I keep the bass and two rhythm guitars just going, all the intervals that the orchestras or the choir do can change the things that you... So if you keep the fifths, everything sort of works in between then, and I layer octaves. So I'll have like a C, a low C, a piano doing a C, the bass is doing a C below that. If there's anything to add thickness to it, I may add another guitar doing the fifth. But that way you can apply all the octaves. You can have your minors and your majors and your mix of majors and minor Lydians and all these things happening with the foundation being just knuckle dragging heavy metal, which really works for me. So octaves and fifths is how that works, but also what's really cool about this tuning is that because the strings are just G, C, G, C, G, C, E, what works on this string works on this string and also works on this string. So when you're doing scales, you're just kind of like minor, like it's the same thing on every string, right? And when it comes to arpeggios, these three strings are the same, and these two strings are the same. So you just go. Even down low one, right? It's really, really easy. And I think that's the reason why I like it so much, is because, again, when you're playing live, all the complicated things, all your sweeps and all your crazy melodies, give it to the guy who strings his, has his strap really high and gets it right every time. And you can just sit there and go, come on, right? So this guitar, again, this is 7-string version. I'll give you a lowdown. One second. Where am I? Okay. So I like the sound of a Les Paul Custom. I like how that sounds in the studio. It's got a mahogany body with a maple top and an ebony fretboard. It's got a shorter scale. I like the set neck. I like the pitch of the headstock, but I hate how it looks. Every time I wear a Les Paul, I feel like a total tool. But I like the way it sounds. So we started this guitar design by trying to get the same attributes in terms of that sonic palette that the Les Paul has, but with something that looks more like a Stormtrooper, I guess, right? So basically, it's a mahogany body with a maple top, ebony fretboard. On this 7-string version, it's a 26-inch scale, so it's actually quite short. And on the 6-string version, it's a 25 and a half. I like the idea of the 7-string not being a particularly long scale as well, because you can sort of play it in a similar way to the 6-string and how it feels. Pitch of the headstock is such that when I lie this on the ground, which I'm going to do always because I think faster than I am. So I put it down on the ground. The headstock doesn't actually touch the ground, so if I accidentally step on it, which I've already done, I've only had this guitar for a couple of days and I've already stepped on it, it doesn't snap the headstock in the same way as with a Les Paul, where you get that sort of snappy McSnapperton thing that happens. I like the sound of a set neck. For whatever reason, I think it resonates better. Through necks always sound sort of dumb to me in a weird way. Not dumb, it's the wrong word. Syrupy. And so what I did was I asked them to do this one as a through neck feel, but with a set neck construction. So it's sort of inset to here, but then they carved it down so it feels like that. They did this one super quick for NAMM, and as a result of that, they forgot to put the string holes here. So changing the string has been a nightmare, but they will remedy that. Because a lot of what I've done up to this point has required a lot of performance, I like the lights because they're super cheesy. But on a practical level, you can, like on an impractical level, it lights up and it's like a cock extender, right? But it's like, but on a practical level, the side lights. So when you're on stage, you know, and the lights are off and everything's going to get super epic, you don't start on the second fret when the song actually starts on the third, which has happened countless times. We've got another one that we designed together called the Plank, which is basically a replica of a sort of telly style with a different body and a different body wood. But I couldn't afford to fly it over, so I don't have it here, so pay no attention to the man behind the screen there, but I will play it. And I'm talking really fast right now, and I think it's because I'm nervous, but I'm going to slow down in a second. Here we go. Ready? So Empath was a nightmare. It wasn't, actually. It was really a cool record to do, and I've been doing interviews for it all day and all yesterday and the day before. And I was afraid people weren't going to understand it because it's really fucking weird. But it seems like the only person that didn't know that, like, what I did was me. Everybody's like, oh yeah, it sounds exactly like what we expected from you. And in fact, a lot of the people that helped me with it, by the time it was done, they're like, yeah, I don't know why you didn't recognize that this is what you do, right? So apparently Empath is what I do, and it's really strange, right? All right, I've run out of things to talk about. So, can someone give me some sort of input here? It would make it way less awkward.
How was NAM?
Thank you. NAM is 100,000 people that you hate and 75 of your favorite people in the world. And it's, if you can picture working at a guitar store with people awkwardly bashing through the fastest sweep arpeggios they can, all in slightly different tuning from each other of varying degrees of quality, while sweaty, coked out reps try and talk to you about their time with Motley Crue in 1987. And then after it, everybody gets together at the Hilton Hotel and tries to fuck each other, basically. And if you're not particularly interested in doing that, your days are spent with obscene amounts of social fatigue, because on some level as well, the people that support me in the gear side of it provides a type of advertisement for me that the record industry no longer can provide, because just, you know, it's just shattered in that sense. So I do have to play the game, and I'm increasingly finding that my patience to play the game is becoming more and more transparent, that I really don't care. But I do care in the sense that, again, there's 75 people, like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. But I think the reason I care about that is because I've got 29,000 unanswered emails on my phone, and over the last 6 months, I haven't answered many of the people that I see at NAM, and it gives me an opportunity to buy myself another 6 months. So that's what NAM's like. Yeah. Anyone else? I'm going to get this. It's going to be great. Once we start getting momentum, it's going to be sick. Oh, I'm going to ask him, because then it seems like there's people back there too. It's great. Yes, sir.
How important is improvisation?
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge, because I think that in absence of it, doing things like this would suck. Because I think the mechanism that allows you just to talk and ramble is the same one that allows you to improvise live. And I've got a buddy in a famous band, because I'm Captain Famous Friends, who their band has always been awesome. Like, they've never not been awesome. And when you talk about this band, everybody's like, they're the best, right? But he can't improvise. He doesn't want to improvise. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that he hasn't failed publicly. And I think for myself, I mean, it's like, oh my God, dude. Like, I've been doing that professionally for 25 years. And as a result of it, I don't fear it in the same way. It's like, I don't really have anything to lose. You know, I don't need a bigger house. I don't need a different car. I don't need more gear. And so my desire to play music has a lot to do with the fact that I enjoy contributing my crap to the world of crap. And to meet other people, it's like, it's a joy for me. And so improvisation is something that I think the best solution to learning how to do it is just to go out there, put your balls or whatever you've got, your ovaries, on the line, and then and just hope that after a few incredibly awkward social failings, that translates into fucking, I'll go to that note, doesn't matter. And then Victor Wooten said it really well. I remember he said, if you land on the wrong note, just move your finger in one fret in either direction and you'll be in tune, right? So, I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen if you fuck up? What's the worst thing that can happen? It's like, you know, I'm sure, terrible things. So, but this new record, like, so on this record we had Drummer Morgan Agren, who's been a buddy and just one of the best people you ever meet, and he's with Zappa and he's with Frederick Thorndahl, and he's really immediate sort of reactionary improvisational drummer. And Keneally as well, the guy who plays guitar and keyboards in this project now, he's that's what he does. He's an improviser, and I think that that this experience has made me realize that what I've done over the past couple of years live has been I've been trying to control it so heavily because I want it to be perfect. I want it to sound like the CD. I want it to be exactly like the record, but I realize more now than ever that I'm not perfect, and that pursuit has made what I've been doing live get increasingly more backing tracks, right? And at the end of it, I've got choirs, orchestra, percussion, synths, extra guitars, like everything, to the point where I want it to be right, I want it to be right, I want it to be right. And then by the end, it's like you're starting to get into karaoke, in a sense. You're playing, and plus every show is the same. It's like when you play in Dortmund and then you play 3 or 4 months later in the UK, and it's the same show, you know? And there's something to be said for that, specifically if you're trying to direct the audience through a particular emotional experience. But then a lot of times we're finding that there's people that come to multiple shows. And at that point, you're sort of looking in the front row and you're just kind of like, sorry, it's the same thing, right? And so on the next round, what I'm planning to do is I've learned my lesson after doing 2 bands, Strapping Lad and Devin Townsend Project, that maybe being in a band I'm not particularly well suited for it. Because my vision is such that if I have an idea that I want to follow, it's like I have to. There's no question about it. And so the next round of touring, I'm hiring a session band of really, really high-level musicians. And we're going to take all this music that I've done, we're going to choose a whole bunch of songs, learn a shitload of them, and then interpret them differently. And the idea is to build it from the acoustic show, which the intention with that is to make a statement that it's about the song, it's about the emotional content of it, and you can do it with just an acoustic guitar. It doesn't matter what you have, you don't need all that stuff. And then build it up, and then when we get back here in November, the idea is to have not an entirely improvisational group of people, but something that hopefully each night will be a different experience. And I was getting bored with just playing the same thing every night. And it gets good, but ultimately I think when you're playing live, you're trying to connect with other human beings on some level, right? And so if you just sound like the CD, you might as well stay home, right? Yeah. All right, so let's do another one, and that'll lead me into another segue. I'm gonna do it naturally. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be great. So one more question. Yes, sir.
With Empath, would you say that if you look back at the difficult stages you had with the albums like Infinity, and even with Epicloud now, did you find that when you were writing this record, it turned out exactly how you envisioned it to sound? If you look back at how did Epicloud sound when you first had the idea of Epicloud, when you had the idea of Infinity, because I know that sometimes they change from the initial sort of conception to the end. Would you say that Empath is how you envisioned it to sound, or has it actually had some sort of transformation as well?
The idea of what I do is rooted around a vision-based type of writing. And what I mean by that is I have a very clear picture in my head of what a record is supposed to make me feel when it's done. But what the specifics, tonally, note choice-wise, aesthetically, that doesn't appear until you start taking away things from. I heard a thing the other day about sculpting, where you have a block of something, and you take away everything that isn't what the final sculpture is, and that's how you do it. And in a similar way, it's that way with this music. But for me, it's about, like with Empath, I knew that I wanted it to make me feel more real than I've done in the past, because I think it started getting into the situation with DTP where there was a sense, it was like, oh, we're the positive thinking band. You know what I mean? It's like, and everything is okay. Everything's going to be okay. But I'm at home and I'm like, what if it isn't? Everything's fucked. Like, profoundly fucked in the world right now in so many ways. And it's like, and I started feeling like you can make a lot of money, I think, by trying to tell everybody that everything's going to be okay. You know what I mean? And buy a t-shirt that says, everything's going to be okay. But instead, with this one, the feeling that I was trying to articulate was it needs to be a representation of the chaos that we're being fed daily with the media and the news and the fear and just kids being shot and animals being, and it's like horror all the time. And if you've got kids and aging parents and all this thing, it's like, and people were coming up to me at the end of the DTP thing as if I had some sort of answer, They're like, oh, it's good that you're doing this positive thing. And I'm just like, I'm fucked. It's like my whole life is this perpetual fear-based reaction to trying to make sure I can keep my shit together. So when it started with Empath, I've been trying to meditate for years, so I started going to these classes and like meditation and exercise, and the idea with that is one of the fundamental problems that has been a consistent stumbling block for me is my propensity for overthinking. When it comes to music, when it comes to technique, when it comes to production, when it comes to everything, I have this tendency to overthink to the point where I make mountains out of molehills. So the idea of the meditation was, okay, well, how do you let this go? How do you allow yourself to have these fears and everything be part of your reality without letting them get their claws into you, but not to not acknowledge it, which is what I've done strapping. Like the whole idea was after that. With strapping, I think there was so much of my reaction to anger. I didn't understand anger when I was a kid, so strapping was like, I'm going to be angry at everybody. But I didn't realize until retroactively that my reason for doing that was because I thought on some level if I was angry, really angry, it would keep it away from me. It was almost like a shield. But what I learned from that was the accountability of it. As soon as you start projecting that, that's what comes back to you. So when it came to Empath, I was like, how do we do this? How do we make a record that revisits that? Like basically takes your past and your lineage and everything that's going on musically with you, lays it out so you can analyze your relationship with it, and then present it in a way that ultimately, through that chaos, inspires a sense of like hope. Like it's fucked, but it's like, I can't give up and neither can you. That was the whole idea. And that was the vision. So how different was that at the end than it was in the beginning? Well, there was no beginning. It was just, that's your end goal. At the end of this record, I have to feel that. And so the whole thing, the intention that I went through this record from the very beginning to the very end is I kept saying to myself, like, make sure that you can represent this like incredibly dark stuff without it becoming incredibly dark, right? And so I have people that help me. I have people that sort of suggest chordal ideas or rhythmic ideas, but it has to adhere to this kind of internal barometer, and it did. By the end of it, the way someone's phone's ringing. Is that me? Oh, that's my alarm.
Oh, is that what it is?
It's my alarm.
We can hear it on the mic.
It's time to wake up. I just got this guitar. Would you mind? It's in my jacket there. Yeah. Yeah. There it is. Oh, no. So yeah, basically it was like I was thinking today that the record ended up being like looking in a mirror, and when I first heard the record back, it scared the shit out of me. I was like, this is way too intense. This is way too much. But then it was almost like the people that were involved with it, it was almost like they were helping me see that, and they were like, "Yeah, dude, this is what you look like." And I was like, "Holy fuck, man! Like, really, for real?" And some very incredible people have been involved with this record in ways that you would never expect, right? Like, I gotta wait till now. I'm predisposed with the phone. Is it? Sorry, Freddie. Is it my bag?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the iPad. You see my bag? I got a Hawaiian bag. Oh, you find it?
Yeah.
Time to wake up. So, so Mike Keneally, a bunch of people. A bunch of people, right? Chad, that's an interesting thing. So Nickelback, right? Well, I'll tell you why. This is why it's really interesting and why it was really important for this record. So, him and I are about the same age, grew up in the same town. Everybody, you're supposed to hate Nickelback. That's what you're supposed to do, right? So.
They make me ashamed to be Canadian.
Okay, well, let me continue. Maybe this will change your mind. So basically, I was super critical of the band. I was like, fuck that band. Blah, 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 blah. It's disingenuous. It's this and that and the other thing. Then I heard one of their songs last year, and a bunch of friends of mine worked with it. And so I wrote on Twitter, I like the new Nickelback song. And because I thought it was cool. I mean, it wasn't like, I just liked it. And the ensuing shitstorm that came down my neck was insane. People like, fuck you, I will never fucking listen to you. How dare you like something I don't like, right? So the next day I got a text from Chad, and I've never talked to the guy before, and he's like, hey, thanks for not talking shit about me. That was cool. And I was like, well, just to be clear, I have, for sure. And I said, I've analyzed my feelings on that, and because we have mutual friends, I had heard you had talked shit about me. And I was also jealous, I think, on some level, because that's what you do in Canada. If someone has success, you cannot be happy for them. You just have to be like, well, he's clearly like sucks cocks in hell, so I don't know what to say. So it was cool because we it was a nice little interaction. That was cool. And I said, oh, when I'm back in Vancouver, if you're free, we'll just get a coffee, And so I got back and gave him a call, and he said, well, why don't you come over? And I was like, okay, sure. So dude's got a lot of money, right? Like, no lie. And I remember pulling up and just being like, oh. So anyway, went in and we found we got along well. And it was interesting to me as well because his level of success was such that he's done all these things that I've never done. And in my career, I've done some cool stuff. You do some festivals, you do you get to play an arena every now and then, but there's no handbook for that. So if you have questions about it, if it emotionally affects you in a way that is like confusing, there's no one to talk to about it. You can't, because a lot of times people interpret that as bragging. Like if you go up to somebody, buddy across the street, he works at the gravel pit. I'm like, we played this really big show and people were there and it made me feel weird, you know what I mean? And he's like, why don't you just shut the fuck up, right? But this was a really interesting thing for me because I was able to say, I'm confused about this. He's like, oh, this, and this. And I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting. I've never had it laid out that way. So, full disclosure, 46 years old, and prog metal is not a particularly lucrative genre, right? So every month that goes by, there's money things, and I'm like, a kid needs braces, or there is insurance on the gear, and it's expensive. So last year when I quit DTP, there was a part of me that's like, fuck, maybe I should just make a pop record. Honestly, I was like, maybe I should just put together a couple of choruses. I know that there's 600 to 1,200 kids a night that, or people a night that will maybe buy that, and it will kind of be like Ocean Machine, except with a bigger kick drum or something. You know what I mean? It's like, we'll start with the chorus, and maybe we can make it 3.5 minutes long, and we'll make it about positive thinking, because that way, I know it's a sellable market. And so when I was with Chad, I said, I'm tired, man. I've been doing this for fucking ever. And it's like, and we're still month to month. Would you help me produce? Because we get along, would you help me produce like a commercial record? And he was like, I'll tell you what you need to do. He says, you need to get over this fear. You need to make exactly what it is that you need to do. You need to make uncompromising music, and you need to turn your vocals up. It was crazy. He was the one that convinced me to make this in a lot of ways. And it was such a profound experience for me in a way, because I wouldn't have expected that. You know what I mean? He was like, the reason why I do the music that I do is because this is who I am. And people may not like that, but this is how it comes out for me. And then watching him, because at the time he was playing his demos for his new record, and he was super into it. It wasn't like he was like, oh, I got this thing, I'm going to pull the wool over everybody's eyes, I'm going to write. It's like he had broken up with his wife, and he's like, this is a song. And I was just like, you do the same thing I do. It's just what you do results in something that a lot of people have problems with. But also, it's like, it doesn't mean that he's not being genuine. And in the same way, I realized from that meeting that I need to do the same thing in a way. But what happens when I do that is this gong show that you're about to hear in a couple of months. But it was really an important thing for me to hear that from somebody, and specifically from somebody that people have so much hate for. He's like, people fucking hate me, man. And this is my advice to you. You're not supposed to make pop music. You're supposed to do that. If you make pop music, that's being disingenuous in a lot of ways. And it was so intense for me in a way. And so I asked him to sing on the record, and he sings a harmony on a song that is death metal. It's just brutal fucking music. Brutal. It's 7 minutes of 30-second no kick drums. You know what I mean? It's just like artillery fire. And then all of a sudden there's Chad. But it's a harmony. It's hidden in it's not hidden in the music, but it's like it helps the music. It's a cool thing. Had I not had that experience with him, I think I would have been tempted to make something that would have, in a sense, gone in direct opposition to the thing that I've done for years that has allowed people to be so supportive. So I feel like I owe him a real debt of gratitude in a weird way. I mean, he was really drunk when he told me that too.
That's exactly what she told me when we got married.
Yeah.
I was this awful post-hardcore band, and I'd go home and listen to like Einstürzen und Neubauten, and then she said to me,
Our first date, he's like, "You want to hear my music?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, okay." And I told him it was terrible. I was like, "It makes my ears want to bleed." But like,
yeah, she said, make
let's
us
get married.
Yeah, and she saved me creatively.
Very
I
good.
love doing what I want. And
Very good.
she used to tell me every night, don't make a pop record, because I go to bed like, oh god, it's so much money for a pop record.
But you know what I realized about the meeting with him is the reason why he's made money is because he's good at it.
Yeah.
And I realized while I was there that I could do the same thing and it wouldn't be the same. And watching his process, it was, he was a scientist. It was like, he's phenomenally fucking intelligent. And just the way that he was summarizing me, well, it was like Good Will Hunting in a way. He's like blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. And he goes, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. He says, why are your vocals so quiet on your music? And I'm like, why? I don't like singing. I don't like being heard. And he said, it's equivalent of, like, have you ever played hide and seek with a kid? And he's like, puts a blanket over himself when he's in the middle of the living room and thinks that no one can see him. He's like, dude, it's too late. You gotta fucking turn your vocals up, man. But it was just, it's like, you know, I can't say that we're friends necessarily, but our lives are just way too different, you know, way too different. But it was such a profoundly helpful meeting for me. Not only because he helped me with like questions that I can't ask people. Like, what do I do in this situation? It's like the pool of people that have had those sorts of experiences are few in my life, at least. So to have somebody that's like, this is what you do. This is what's going to happen. This is how you need to deal with it. This is, you know what I mean? Like, I like firing people, for example. I was like, do you fire people? You gotta fire people every week. And I was like, dude, it kills me. He's like, well, you know, you have a choice at that point. It's like, what are your objectives? And, you know, I don't want to make it out like it was a bigger thing than it was, but it's an example of one of the things that happened on this record that shaped me in a way that allowed me to make this step on empath that I found terrifying. You know, I don't want to be seen. And in fact, with DTP, it's been very convenient for me because I can structure how I want people to perceive me. I can say, I'll choose this photo and we'll Photoshop it. And you know what I mean? And like this here, we can auto-tune this, and we won't put out that, but we'll put out this. And in a sense, you're like, you're not a caricature of yourself, but you're exaggerated in a way that if you feel like just being who you are, you're running up against a wall because, you know, it's like people are like, oh, I didn't know you did that. You know, I didn't know, whatever. So with this one, even with the photos, like, I mean, I can't dress myself. I hate dressing myself. It's like I've got a pair of clothes, and that's per season, you know? And I like winter best because my main accessory is jackets. I like jackets, right? So when it came to photos, management, label, a lot of people are like, well, you've started gotten this thing going for yourself, so we should put you in a suit and, you know, put some makeup on you and all this stuff. But they weren't there for the photo shoot, so I wore Crocs and a Hawaiian shirt, right? And I had this like fishing hat and everything. And when they saw it, they were just like, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, because then I don't have to wear anything else. You know what I mean? When I go out in public at that point, I'm like, this is what I bring to the table, right? And there's really something to be said for musically in the same way when you're talking about improv, when you're talking about making music. The less you have to pretend you're something that you're not, the way more energy you're going to have for social things, because people don't expect anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, if you've got like, you know, if I went out and wore a wig, like I think about some of these musicians that I'm sure we all know that wear wigs, you know, like how much of a pain in the ass it is. I heard about a guy that had a guitar lesson with a guy that wore a wig. And when they showed up at his house, he didn't have his wig. And the guy was just like, who's this old man? And then the old man left the room and this guitar player comes back, right? And he's like, holy shit, right? But I mean, to go out in public every day wondering like whether or not people are like concerned about the fact that my hair is, like I have no hair, it just seems like a lot of effort. So Chad was one of those guys that really helped with that. Keneally as well, like he contacted me about, I gotta play that other guitar, I want to jam while we're talking in 2 seconds. So, bam! All right, so let me see, what did I do? This one? What do we call it? That one, all right. And then we go bang, and then we go bang, let's see. And then we go this one, right. So when I write, this is how I write. It's like even as I was just talking to you guys there, I realized that without a guitar in my hands, noise gate, 2 seconds. So noise gate. Yeah, that one's not mine though.
Oh,
It's called Dirty Cactus.
YouTube cactus prank called Best Thing Ever.
I YouTube. What did I YouTube the other night? Something about a cat, undoubtedly. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Shark cat. Yeah. So when I write, this is how I write. So I talk, and my whole process is stream of conscious. Like when I'm with people, when I'm in environments, it's like this is what I do. So to have a clean sound that kind of has a lot of echo, and the reason I use echo and have used it for so long is because, in a sense, it makes you interact with your past. And I like structuring themes that way, and I like structuring albums that way. I like the fact that the echo of this note works with this note. You know what I mean? Or you could go. So when I write, I basically just sort of sit on the couch or whatever and just do this with my fingers, typically. And I usually use a guitar that is disconnected from work. So the frame of stuff is perfect for me, but it also reminds me of work, right? So I will play like an old acoustic. I got some old Waterlog Martin thing, I think it is, you know what I mean? Or like a telly or something, but I would never record with it necessarily or tour with it. It's just, it doesn't have that vibration of work attached to it, right? I forgot what we were talking about. Can someone remind me? It doesn't matter. What are we talking about now? So empath, yeah. Wigs. Yeah, neither of those things are interesting
Writing
now.
process.
What's that?
Writing process.
Writing process. So there's 3 ways that I write. I have a template set up on Pro Tools. I use Pro Tools, Ableton, Logic, Melodyne. What else do I use? TuneTrack, you know, and then all the plugins and everything that go along with it. So I've got 3 specific types of writing that I do. One of which I take the template in Pro Tools or Logic, and I've got it set up that the first track is an instance of Superior Drummer, and I've made a kit that is sort of an all-purpose sort of kit. And then my studio is set up with a very minimal amount of output gear. I've got outboard gear. I've got the Axe effects, I've got an SSL compressor that I never use, and I've got a preamp that I use for my vocals, which is a Universal Audio 6176, or about $3,000, and I've had it for about 15 years, and I just have one microphone in there. So basically, I have my template set up. So under the drums is bass. I got one cable that goes into a signal distribution. So that signal distribution goes into a Sansan. It goes into a track that is preset with a compressor on it. And then below that, I've got 4 tracks of clean guitar, which are automatically bussed to the Axe effects. I've got 4 tracks of dirt guitar, automatically bussed to the Axe effects. I've got a Kemper as well, but I found now. See, everything's okay alarm. And so when I have an idea, I just arm the track that idea is going to be like congruent with. So it's like you've got, I've got an idea for a heavy track. All right, arm heavy track 1. It's automatically on the Axe effects, right? I've got maybe 6 instances of software synths. The one that I use most often is called Omnisphere because it's got like a ton of like options. I always use presets as well. So when I'm recording, I basically just like scroll through the presets while hitting the C until it's something that I like, and I might modify it from there, but for the writing process I just basically start there and then find something that's in the ballpark and then track. As a result, all my demos end up being the same sessions that the final tracks are, and they are basically at about 80% done by the time I've finished the demo. So when it comes to a record like Empath or Transcendence or anything, I've recorded maybe 25 songs, and they're all kind of at 80%, and so it makes it really easy for me to release like a demo CD at the end. And on Empath, there is another 10 songs that are basically done. They're like, there's a song on there called King that people wanted to have on the main record, but I decided during this process that I hate double records. When I see even a band I love, when they release a double record, I'm like, oh God, here we go. We got to get into this, right? It's like endless amounts of stuff. And there's also this sort of subconscious thought that, like, couldn't they have edited that down, you know? So we made Transcendent, or the other one I'm talking about, work over a single disc. And the demos are derailed. See that? Isn't that great? I just was going down an avenue and I hit something heavy and I was just like, oh, and now we do it. We're talking about this. I should probably hit that note then. So that's how I write. That's the one way. The second way is improvisational. I'll get in a room with a bunch of musicians. I'll set up the recording so that it goes straight to tape, and then I just start playing. And I like reacting to people, as opposed to sitting down in a studio and people like, okay, well I'm in D now, and then we can go to C, and like intellectualizing it. I just play along with what other people are playing, and then that results in a really interesting type of musical expression for me. And in fact, there's some people I was working with recently who are really gifted musicians, but because they write more from the point of view of like, let's start here and let's map it out and let's make sure this rhythm scheme and this rhyme scheme works. I was just like, man, we should just watch Rick and Morty at this point because this is not working, right? And then the third way is I'll play like this, you know, and usually while I'm watching TV, right? I love documentaries. That fire one bummed me out. Holy fuck. And then what's the other one I saw
The guy
recently?
that sucked dick for the Evian water.
That was me.
Great.
I was thirsty, you
I
know?
need a friend like him.
Yeah, everybody needs a dick sucking friend. I get that. So, marriage. So, wow, sorry, babe. So, and the third way is when I'm writing like this, I'll make a mental note. So, there's nothing that's come up so far. I was thinking, there was one thing. I like this to that. That was cool. That's the only thing I found while I've been sitting here that inspires anything. So what I might do in that situation is then just keep watching TV, you know, I just keep picking away at it. And then I try to put together a rudimentary form, and then I record the demo in a very basic way for this third type of writing. I will put down this guitar with a click track, and I'll double it so it has the impression of being more intentional. And then I print it onto my phone and I listen to it when I'm driving around. So my phone right now, I mean, I got tons of ideas on there. Just, do we have an 1/8" cable or something? Or I can just put it up to the phone, or this thing, whatever it is. Oh, it's from Trace. Website. Wow on Twitter. Okay, let me just see what she sent. 2 seconds. Oh, I shouldn't do that. How Mongolians cut watermelon. Anyway, okay, so I'll go to my demo file here. Okay, so I'll give you an idea of what my demos are like in the really, really early stages of it here. So I call this batch 2. So 70s vibe, I call this, right? It's like. And so for vocals on something like this, I'll mumble them. So. Right? And then what else we got? See, alpaca lip ear. Right? See. Oh, right. That one's bullshit. Like just acoustic. This one is. Bork is the next one. That's Bork. Broken, right? This one's cool. I like this one. I'm going to use this one day. And this one is creepy drum, but the point, dude, it's just endless shit. Like it's just. It's just a click track and the thing I was listening to on the right, and Doom. Let's see what Doom is. Enya. But it's just. And I know this. Anyway, it's just endless. It's just endless shit. So Shut up. The other way that I tend to write as well. Now this has happened with a lot of songs in my catalog. Ia for one, Awake, Effervescent, the first song off of Epicloud. I'll dream it. So I'll have a dream, and in the dream is a song, like completed. And then I wake up and I'm like, oh fuck, that one hasn't been written yet. And so what I do is I sing it into my phone and I mail it to myself and go back to sleep. In fact, let's see. I'll show you this. So I got it under voice message. Let's see how this works. Voice memos. All right. Is this one? Is this one? Verse. I have a guitar by my bed. Like dead asleep. Pre-chorus. Could see sound with a high octave. And then when I wake up, it's like message from Devin. I'm like, 30 years?
She must be wearing earplugs.
Oh, we haven't slept in the same bed. We haven't slept in the same bed for maybe 12 years. It's been fucking amazing. I hate sleeping in the same, other than conjugal visits, like, fuck that. It's like, and it's like, I mean, sex is so crazy too, and it's like, and that, I like being in a relationship as well, because like the acquisition of like sexual contact as just like, as a hobby, like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a horror show. And in fact, I'm so horrified by like my humanity and sex in general that it's like, having somebody that doesn't make me feel absolutely ridiculous about the lizard brain is like a real benefit. But when my son was born, I was like, can we just like not sleep in the same bed now? And she was like, oh fuck yeah. So yeah, it's like I've got my own little room. There's like 12 things in there that I can maintain in my own obsessive, terrified way, and I can roll around and fart and like wake up in the middle of the night and do that. You know what I mean? And I highly recommend it. It is a marriage saver as far as I'm concerned, right? No? Yes? No? All right. Really? Yeah. But you still do that thing on Wednesday night, right? You know what I mean? It's like, you want a back rub? You know that one, right? She's like, sure, back rub, right? I was like, oh, what's this? Doing. How'd that get there? Yeah, it's exactly. All right, so yes, that is the way that I write. Right? And I think that ultimately my profound uncomfortableness with being human is what has allowed me to continue to have things to write about. And it's only been recently where I've made the decision to myself that no, not only are you human, but you are incredibly human. And that has actually helped in terms of the writing process as well, because I think I've just been so embarrassed of myself on so many levels, like for whatever reason, for like doing what I'm doing right now and just rambling and talking and or any of these things, to the point where anytime I've written music that is unequivocally me, I've been horrified by it, because I'm like, oh, that's too real, it's too who I am. And so I've typically covered that up with self-deprecation and also some sort of either metaphor or analogy, like Ziltoid or whatever, where I feel like I can get away with saying all these things without actually having to say it. But lo and behold, people realized that it actually wasn't an alien. It was actually just, I know, it's crazy, right? So with Empath, it's the first time that I've actually been comfortable enough just to be like, fuck it, here it is. And as a result, it is like death metal, and then musical theater, and then meditational, and then prog. And the first song that we're releasing next week, oh, that's weird, major. That's right, I still like that. Yeah, I like that. We're just talking about musical theater, right? So this record has it all on there, and it's very naked for me in a way, and it's super intense. And so the first song we're releasing is called Genesis, and it is basically 6 songs in one. And I think for people who are expecting it just to be like, Storm Bending or something like that, it may be very off-putting. but I figured that it's best just to get it out of the way. It's like, look, this is going to be different than it was at one point, and I'm confident with it in the sense that I'm okay with myself on there. So writing music, that's how I do it, right? And I do a lot of this, just talking, right? But I know I've got this internal thing that's saying, as much as I like this, it's only a passing note, and I don't have any burning need to pursue it, so I'll probably let that one go. Another question? Yes, sir?
You were talking about dreaming about music. When you have fever, do you happen to dream more about music?
Oh yeah.
I haven't had a fever in a long time. I had an Indian last night and shit myself a new asshole today. Like it was crazy. Just bombs over Tokyo, and I got no music from that either. But it's been a long time since I've had those like Pink Floyd type fever dreams, right, where your hands are big and you know everything's like. Last time I did, I think I was maybe about 14 years old, and I was listening. And it's funny you bring that up. I was listening to Worldwide Live by the Scorpions, which was this sort of shitty live record they put out in like 1985. And because I had a fever, the echo of the guitar inspired me to do the sound that I have now. It was like kind of a hallucinatory experience where I interpreted what I was hearing from the album as they were playing in front of like 5 million people or something. It was just such a... Oh! And as a result of that, the second single that we're putting out from Empath is called Spirits Will Collide, which is an Enya song. It's Enya. But I've always wanted to make a heavy version of like an Enya thing. So I did. And it's really what you would expect from that combination of events. But I went to Serbia to do the video, and they said, what's the video going to be? And I was like, I want to make this... we only got 15 grand, so we can do what we can. But I said, I want this to be a video that makes it look like the biggest concert ever made, ever. And I said, I want elephants to be playing the drums. I would like a gorilla playing the bass. I'd like to have 1,000-person choir. I want to have 5 million people in the audience, and 1 billion people in the audience. I want the speaker array to be 4 planets that are over top of the moon. So for 15 grand, it might end up looking really, really shit. But it's like... But the idea was to make something that represented that sort of epic thing that's in my head. It's not going to happen. You know, we're not going to play for 1 billion people with elephants playing drums. But in my mind, So that's what the video is going to be, and it all stems from the fever dream that I had listening to the Scorpions, right? So it's been a long time, yeah. I haven't gotten a flu shot in years either, so maybe there's something to do with the fact that I'm just healthy as a horse.
You must be the only person who leaves now not getting ill.
I did last year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, but this year I made a conscious. I went with Che and we had a good time, but I made a conscious effort not to pick my nose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like anthrax.
Well, picking your nose, man. You're shaking hands with people and going up to the second knuckle. There's no way you're gonna...
I literally found out about it the other day that like people get flu on the tubes, they hold the bars and they pick their nose. I had no idea, but it's about touching your face, it doesn't.
It was hard too, to not pick my
man.
nose, because I'm like, I'm in there. Yeah. I'm just going, man. It's like I feel something move in the back of my skull. Another question? Yes, sir.
2 questions. Do you use pitch correction?
Yes.
If so, how much?
Not excessively. And the way that I use it is because the vocal tracks in the template, I have 4 harmony tracks set up. And those harmony tracks consist of 4 tracks each. And I've got it set up so there's a vocal input, and then 4 tracks labeled V1, V1-2, V1-3, V1-4, and then an auxiliary that gets bussed to that has a compressor and a de-esser on it, and then an auxiliary that sends it to the echo. And so if I have a harmony, put 4 of them, put 4 of them, put 4 of them. For those ones, what I do is I do this plugin called Vocaline, and I go through the first one and it lines up the transients, so the S's and T's are all together, and I export it from the beginning and I bring it into Melodyne, and then I just basically hit select all, and then do Apple Option P, and what that does, it just goes doink, and kind of puts it into, just kind of smooths out the pitch, and the effect of that is that really kind of synth-like thing. On my lead vocals, I will do the same sort of Option P to it sometimes, depending on how naked it is, right? When I listen back to some of the stuff when I first got Melodyne, it's like I went overboard on it. Key was the first time that I used it. And I remember, no, Addicted. And it was like, I remember hearing EI in hindsight. It's like, we don't even understand, right? And at the time, I thought I was doing myself a favor with it, but now I can hear it. So it's about being more selective with it. But I do enjoy it. I like it a lot. Yeah.
Second question is, I know you've mixed and produced for other people before. Are you going to do that?
Fuck no. I hated that. And it wasn't that I hated the bands. It's just, whatever I choose to do, I'm going to get obsessed with. It's just how I function. And when you are obsessed with people that you can not entirely choose the social interaction, and if you're prone to absorbing people, what ended up happening for me is I would find myself in situations with people, lyrics, music that I didn't either agree with or I felt was like psychologically like really exhausting. But in order to get it right, which I had committed to do, I'd have to get deep into these things, you know, like Christian heavy metal or like black metal or any of these things. I'm just like, holy shit, both of you guys, just, you know what I mean? So I found that, like I tried mixing for a band. I did like the internet thing, you know, a couple years back, but it's like, I'm good at doing my own thing, but I either make other bands sound like my production or I just resent it. Plus there's no money in it either, right? It's like if you, okay, so a mix, maybe I'll get paid, when I was doing it, I might get paid $5,000 to do a mix. That's my $5,000 chord. But they pay you $5,000 for 2 weeks under the assumption that's going to take you 2 weeks to do it, and then I'll spend 2 months, you know? And then by the end of it, you're not even breaking even, not even close, because I want it to be a certain way. So now I get asked a lot to produce, and I say no to it all of it. Thank God. Another question? Yes, in the back. Yeah, there's a ton of different. Okay, let me start by saying the source sounds are one thing. If you're using digital representations of amps, I mean, any of these will work. Like, I mean, I just sort of brought this in today, and I got close to my goal with the Kemper and the Helix. In the DAW world, say you're using GarageBand or Logic even, because Logic X for $200 is absolutely brilliant program. So let's say you've got $200. They've got, Chuck was so good, Logic. In Logic, they've got a bunch of guitar sounds, which I've gotten great sounds with. In fact, you remember Catch 33 by Meshuggah? They used the built-in guitar synth, or guitar patch for Cubase. Like, that's the sound. So you can get it from what you need, right? I think the Fortin one is really cool. It's like, you know, $150 or something, and the Positive Grid makes a good one as well. So once you get a sound that you like, I do two things to it in the master bus. I will take the high pass and the low pass. So I'll scoop out everything in the guitar from basically not 60, maybe 50 down. Now what that does is you're not really going to hear it, but that information is still present, whether or not you can hear it, and it makes the speakers move even if you don't hear it. So by getting rid of all that low information, it makes room for the bass. And then the top end, you might get a really sort of satisfying sizzle in the top end, but I highly suggest taking the low pass and just bringing that back just a touch as well, because what ends up happening with that frequency is it interrupts the keyboards and the cymbals. And then the last thing I'll say about getting a guitar sound is what is a gratifying guitar sound on its own very often doesn't work in the mix. So one thing that you'd want to, in my opinion, remember is that mid-range is your friend. So, you know, and the least amount of like equalization you can do to it, I think ultimately ends up sounding better, because in the long run, equalization is like you're basically manipulating the phase, right? And so if you've got everything that's sort of in phase with each other and you start doing extreme equalization to it, you're going to find that just the overall spectrum just gets a little smaller, right? There's my, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I got the thing for you. Okay. SonarWorks Reference 4. Yeah. And Waves NX. Those two plugins. What SonarWorks does, and I use it for mixing empath, it's a reference microphone. You put it up against a speaker, makes a pink noise. Put up the second one, makes a pink noise. It tells you how far away your speakers are. So sit where you're listening, put the thing there, makes a reference noise, and then it gives you 40 different positions around the room. And what it does is it does a room analysis of where the deficiencies are in your room, and then you put that plug in at the end of your chain, and it does an equalization counter EQ that flattens the response. So what you're hearing coming out of your speaker in the room is like regardless of where your deficiencies in the room lie. And then you mix, and it's, dude, immediately you're just like, oh, there's not enough mid-range in the bass, there's not enough kick, there's too much low end on the kick. And then when you're done and you're printing your mix, you bypass that plug-in. It's amazing. And Waves NX as well, they've got a little headset thing, it's like maybe $40. And the program, I don't know how much it costs, like maybe $80. And what it does is in your headphones, it gives you a virtual recording room, which does the same thing. They've got profiles for all sorts of like popular headphones, like the Bose ones, which are great, you know. But it flattens the frequency response in the same way, and the headset mic reacts to your camera. So when you turn your head, the frequency, it's like they're speakers, you know. And both those programs have been of huge help to me. And so I ended up mixing the record on the plane, in hotel rooms, and it's ended up being, you know, I'm more satisfied with this mix than any record that I've mixed, right? So those are two things. And that really helps at the low end, because I didn't realize that I'm actually pretty good at mixing. And when I realized that my room was just giving me a bunch of weird information back, I was like, oh, fuck. It's not like I'm fundamentally incapable of mixing, it's just my room has way too much bass, or not enough bass even, right? Yeah. A couple more questions.
We've got a couple from the guys watching. So we've got one.
We got people watching?
Yeah, it's live streaming.
Oh, fuck. Oh, no. Hang on 2 seconds. Just give me a second.
Yeah, that's drunk bug telly.
Cool, yeah, I'm glad we're live streaming. That's great. So, hi, guys. Holy shit, man.
So we've got one from Johnny Gibbs. How satisfied were you with the Plovdiv being the final big show for DTP?
I haven't considered it until you asked. Fine, I think. The only problem that I had with the Plovdiv DVD is when we did the mix down to MP3, what ended up happening is the drums got super loud, and I was really embarrassed of how it sounded on YouTube. That was my only thought on Plovdiv. But I think that the actual product, specifically the surround sound, is excellent, actually. Yeah, and I think as a swan song for the DTP, I mean, yeah, it's cool. I mean, I guess I'm not super romantic in terms of looking back on things, you know? Yeah, we're live streaming, eh? It's great. I'm happy about that. I mean, I think that's really cool.
We've got another one from Toby Sykes.
Wait, before you do, I during this, I had definite thoughts where I was like, thank God it's only these people here. Like, really. Oh
Just
my
imagine
God.
how many people are watching you not wearing trousers.
Fuck that. Holy cow. Okay, get over it, Deb. Watch this. I'm going to get over it. Watch this. It's going to be great. What was the question?
Any visuals or theatrics planned for the Empath Band tour?
Not yet. I think at this point it's still in its formative stages of trying to put together people. I'm auditioning a ton of people, and I want a real specific type of band. The only person that's in it for real now is Mike, right? So he's going to be in it, and I think that there's a certain aspect that can be pursued. Okay, yeah, there's two ideas that I have. It's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a completely white stage with white gear and a blue empath on the floor, and everybody wears black, and the screen on the back will just be like varying degrees of environments. So either be sunny or rainy or something. I like that because it's Spartan. And then the other idea was we make the stage like Margaritaville. Honestly. So we have like inflatable palm trees and a cabana, and there's like, and the kick drums have got bamboo on it, and you know, and everybody's wearing like Hawaiian shirts and shorts and like, you know, fisherman's hats, and we go out and play brutal, crazy metal, right? Like, really?
I like it.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. Yes. So we have some ideas for the live show, and I think it's going to be like sort of Margaritaville. I went on vacation a couple years back with my family, and I realized, it's like, why haven't I done this before? this is the best. And so ever since then, you'll notice on Empath as well when you get the record, structurally it's very weird, but the songs, you'll find it's like, why did he just stop there? But every time I stop, you go to the beach. So I'll give you an example. So I can't play too much, but sure I can. That made a fucking difference. So let's see. But there's this one part of this song, Borderlands, where it gets super intense and then just stops and goes to the beach, right? And then there's like steel drip. Wait. Let's see. Wait. All right. So. All right. Beach. Right. So it's like. So it's this big rock show with like orchestras. And there's like audiences screaming and there's like air horns. But then while I was recording it, I was like, oh, I'm sick of this. And so I was like, we need to go to the beach. So it's just like, but it's just. You know what I mean? And the record starts on the beach, and there's this one part of the record as well where it's like this 20-minute long song, and there's this, it's brutal, and there's this, like, I've got this idea of like orcs, you know, and battle elephants, and all this, and like just super scary shit. And then at the end, the orcs are walking away, it's this big metal breakdown and all this stuff, and then the orcs are saying selfish messiah, like, you know, like how dare you not, but in my mind's eye, I'm sitting on a lawn chair, like at a beach with like a coconut drink, and they're walking by me, like all kicking rocks and bummed out, and then it changes from selfish messiah that they're to women on a beach going, try the papaya, right? So okay, so like the song itself is like, you know, it's like, so it's just. Brutal, right? And then at the end, they're going, right. So they say selfish messiah, right? So wait. And they're like lumbering away, but I'm watching them from a lawn chair, like this. They're like. They're war elephants, and then the ladies come in, they're like trying to spy, right? They're steel drums. Right? So
It's kind of rather deconstruction almost.
no, it's serious in a way that deconstruction wasn't. Even though they've got that, it's like rooted in something like deconstruction. There's still sort of a sense of emotional detachment to it by making it into a story. And the story on this is more about the fact that things are totally brutal, but you have to get through it. You just don't kill yourself. Like that's what the record's about. It's the whole thing is like an anti-suicide sentiment in a way. Like I know so many people, like I'm sure we all do, that are like really depressed and like suicidal and all these sorts of things. And to make a record that is rooted in that sort of like cathartic release, like if you're gonna be brutal, be fucking brutal. If you're gonna be, you know, if you're on the beach, go to the beach, right? It's like, but the ups and downs of it are such that at the end, the intention of the record is to leave people saying, well, you can get through it. It's brutal, but you know, I won't give up if you don't, right? So it's like, in a sense, deconstruction had more of like a metaphor I was trying to achieve out of it. It's like, well, it's futile to try and deconstruct the infinite. That just, it's like stupid. But with this one, there's much less about that. It's like, please don't fucking kill yourself, right?
Important message.
I agree.
Yeah.
Especially when you know so many people that are like, oh,
Yeah.
fuck, man, like just dude, you know?
Yeah.
And dudette, and the other, I never know how to address that. Yeah, because it's like male, female, and, transsexual and transgender, and it's like, I never know where the gender things go at this point. So I'll just be like, whoever you are, just don't kill yourself, right? Like, and if you're bummed out, call somebody, because everybody's kind of suffering through the same shit, right? And so in a sense, Empath was made. Even the emotional component of it with the name Empath, it's about you know, there's so much divisiveness in the world and politically and like, you know, with all the bullshit that goes on here and in North America and China and everywhere, there's like this sense that the lack of communication comes from this kind of public sentiment in a way that that feeling for other people is like a liability in a way. But at the same time, I think it's also something that we have had to adopt, just because every time you turn on the news, it's so hard to not absorb the horror that makes, you know, media so much money. It's like you turn on the news and kids being killed, and like, you know, animals in the rainforest and the water in the Arctic, and you're just like, fuck. So in a sense, just for like self-defense, you've got to sort of protect yourself by closing off that empathetic part of our nature. But at the same time, it's that same mechanism that allows us in a lot of ways to not be able to see points of views that are like different from our own, because ultimately it's like, you know, everybody's fighting a battle and everybody's got something different. So that kind of as an underpinning for the theme of Empath ended up adding credence to why there's so many dynamic shifts on the record. It's like brutal, mellow, funny, silly, stupid, prog, meditation, sad, whatever. It's like, it's less about the music and more about the intention of it. And again, the intention of this was like, I don't want it to be false. I don't want it to be like, everything's gonna be fine, we're all okay. It's more like, dude, things are fucked, but we're gonna be okay. Just like, you just gotta get through it. And I think it's really, that was not a cry. I do not fucking cry. Someone told me the other day that a 40-year-old man cry, or a 40-year-old cry, is like, it wells up. Because when you were a kid, you're just like, oh, see, bro, yeah, with me, or whatever, right? And but as 40, you go, and that's like it. It comes out, and that's it. And you're just like, oh, what's that? Oh shit, I gotta football. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like Grandpa crying for the first time is the most unnerving thing, just because he's been so stoic for his entire life. It seems really unhealthy to live like that.
Oh, to be stoic?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's also, it's like, you know, there's a certain point where I think it can become a liability to open yourself up too much as well, right? So I think that ultimately the learning that went into this record was really in line with a midlife crisis. Like, I really firmly believe that. 46 years old, and I got a bunch of shitty tattoos lately, and like just things that I would never expect to do again. I was just like, oh my God, and I exercising, and I get a pectoral muscle, and then I'm wearing tight shirts, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Walking around. But it's like, it was rooted in something that I started recognizing as being like, oh, I'm getting old, and my parents are getting old, and my son's turning into a teen, and it's like, there's this, you know, you don't want to think that you're that connected to mortality, and then when it becomes obvious, it's like, well, I got to do all these things now, you know what I mean? I think that's why, you know, some people like, well, I got to go get a fancy car and like, you know, go try and impregnate somebody half my age because, you know, that adds, you know, virility to my aging wang or something, right? Like, but I think ultimately, for me, it manifested as making a super fucking expensive, weird record. Thank you. And also recognizing that I've been intellectualizing my emotions for so many years that it had become to the point where I was separate from the things in my life that were most important to me. It's like unconditional feelings towards your parents or your friends or your kids. The term that I thought was interesting is called deck effect. And what that was is consciously removing emotional attachments from people, places, or things in fear of it going away. So you end up like closing yourself off because they're gonna die. Or like, I really love this guitar, but I know I can't afford it, so fuck this guitar. You know what I mean? So I think that became part of my process with this, where I was like, okay, when I go to a therapist or when I talk to friends, I mean, I can intellectualize who I am and what I'm feeling and where it's coming from, to the point where I can even bring it back to, it's like, and that stems from this time when I was a kid, when there was like something that I witnessed that was really traumatic. But on a certain level, I don't feel like I'm actually participating in it. So the idea of empath was to be able to use even that as a term to rationalize that being highly sensitive, and not fully like an empath, I'm certainly not, but I'm very much a sensitive person, is something that I think if you could find ways to protect yourself from having that come out in ways that are inappropriate, then you could ultimately have that as a strength more so than a weakness, right? So anyway, yeah, guitar. So it's OpenC and right. Another couple questions. Yes, sorry, the hand that I can't see a human with. Oh, there you are.
I was wondering, you have a really incredible range, and I was just wondering if you have any formal training and sort of how you develop your vocals.
Okay, two things with that. I had a great choir teacher in high school, and I was raised in an environment where it was basically boobs and AC/DC. That's what you're programmed to like as a dude back then. It's like AC/DC, you're back in black. Check out my Trans Am, right? So any sort of show of emotions or like sensitivity is like, well, you must like the same sex that you are, right? So my choir teacher was great because he was very much like just you could sing, and I was like Monty Python. I was like, I just want to sing, and it was like I loved musicals and I loved Enya and I loved all this stuff that was just not particularly like cool to like. So he was the guy that was like, you can do it, and so he inspired me and taught me how to sing with my diaphragm and whatever. And then the other thing was when I moved to LA to do the Steve Vai project, they said you need to go to a vocal coach, somebody who can really like show you how to do it. And we had finished the record, and I went to this guy in LA named Roger Love, who had taught like Heart and like all these things. Roger Love, yeah. And I went in and he listened to me sing and he said, okay, you are not going to be able to sing in another year. The way that you sing is going to destroy your voice. And then I never saw him again, and it's been 30 years. So, and I think a lot of my vocal technique is really based on force of will. Because when I first started a band, I hated. I don't want to sing. Singing sucks. You know what I mean? It hurts. It's like your vibes out there for everybody to criticize. It's like sucks. But then every singer I met was a douche, and it was like I was just like, okay, I'll just sing for a while. Before you know it, here I am, right? So my technique, I don't recommend, and that's basically the first day before a show I'll sing until it really hurts, you know what I mean, until you kind of taste blood, and then for the next week you're okay. Right? Sorry, Roger. Yeah, so let's do a couple more questions at the end if we want to. We can like take some photos.
I think we've probably got time for maybe one more question, and then
Yay!
maybe have a chat.
All right, okay, go for it. This chair is hard on my bum. All right, who was that? Oh, yes, sure.
How do you stop from this, like, you're saying you're an overthinker, I'm in the same boat. How do you stop from just, like, second-guessing yourself?
Meditation.
Just, like, when you're songwriting, just sort of saying, like, oh, I see what you're doing there, and then you're like, well, now it feels shitty.
Meditation. Honestly. And I say that as somebody who is such a novice at it. Like, I try and do it twice a day, and I'm not... I guess I'm, middle class white Canadian male, you know what I mean, with kids and iPads. It's like there's a certain amount of reality that I got to fight in terms of that. But that was the one thing that I found that has allowed me to step away from some of that self-judgment and also judgment from others, right? But again, I'll reiterate, I do it, but I'm a novice at it. But I can't imagine that it wouldn't help most people. For sure. And then I think when it comes to being with people, I get super spiky with people. It sucks. Like, the worst is when I'm writing something and someone's like, I got an idea. And I'm like, oh yeah? Tell me about it. That sounds great. You know, and in my mind I was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, right? And then what I found recently though is like, actually Keneally has been great for that because his ideas were just really great. And at the first, he's like, I got an idea. I'm like, great, tell me. That sounds great. Great, tell me. And as he's telling me, I'm like, yeah, great, interrupting him. But then I found that, it was good practice for me because with him, and a lot of people I've worked with, but with him because I was more open to it, I guess. Whenever he had an idea, I was like, oh, you're telling me your idea because it's something that you think will contribute to it, as opposed to like, I really want a riff in this song. Therefore, I think we should take this thing that you do and do the thing that I want, you know what I mean? And I've had a lot of experience with that, so I can forgive myself for being that cautious with it. But I think with Empath, I was much more open to like listening, and he was great because he's so brilliant. And by the end of it, I was able to accept the ideas more, with a few caveats, unfortunately. But I still react to it really spiky. That's the only way I can explain it, right? Like, someone says they have an idea and all of a sudden my whole vibe is just like toing, Tell me. Great, I'd love to hear your fucking idea. That sounds awesome. Yeah. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too hard about that. I would just say that, you know, meditation has been really good for me, but you know, that's, you know, however many, if you believe in the lifetime things, man, it's like I'm several million away from anything that's going to be known as like centered. Another couple questions, we're good. Oh, yes, sir.
You've always been someone who I found a lot of other music from, so like Old Lady Drivers.
So wicked.
He's a young god, so I'm just wondering, what are you currently listening to?
I listen to Spotify so much that my data plan is a mess. And every month my wife gives me so much shit. She's like, you went through 16 gigs, and I'll have it just while I'm driving, and it's stupid. It's like I've had to readjust my data plan like 4 times now because of my listening thing on Spotify, which sucks. So I tend to listen to music that's very different than what I do. I like electronic music. I like music without vocals. I like really chill stuff. I'm not too much into like really clever electronic stuff in a way, as much as I really love like John Hopkins or Kiasmos or any of these sort of bands that are like interesting and chill. I also find that it demands a lot of attention from me if I'm in the wrong frame of mind. So I listen to basically floaty ambient stuff, you know, and with no vocals. Like, just because I'm enjoying this, because I think it's kitschy to put the phone up to the mic. I'll show you what I was listening to this morning here that I love. Yeah, this. It's just a suggestion on it, but it's like, I guess it's like, let's see, that's what I listen to. All day. Like a little Bose speaker, and it plays all day. Like this stuff. Because what it ends up being is just like watercolors in the background. And then you have a soundtrack to your day that also helps in terms of excessive thinking. You know, it's like, I have a hard time eating without that sort of stuff going. I mean, I can clearly eat, but I mean, my wife and son are always like, why do you always have to have music on? I'm like, well, I mean, you guys sound like a dump truck when you're eating, which is one thing, but it's like, well, at least the son does. But it's just, if I don't have something that is kind of like inconsequential and like floaty, it's like I focus on sounds, I focus on people, I focus on vibes, I focus on all sorts of things that are ultimately really like counteract. And I have a pair of headphones. It cost me $300, and if you guys have got $300 for your mental health, those Bose sound canceling headphones, I wear all day, every day. Like when I'm on the tube, when I'm in the plane, I wear them all day. And it's they get rid of that ambient sound, like the kid crying and the guy making a weird clicking sound when he breathes. Like all that stuff is like eliminated. So it was a $300 investment that I can't recommend enough. So one final question. Do you want one more final? All right. Yes, sir.
Hi. So my friend recently bought your Fishman signature pickups. So they're really, really, really versatile. So I want to ask you about the process that went behind the making of the pickup.
Sure, thank you. I'll give one statement prior to that, and that is, now that I just had a psychological moment before I tell you that, and speaking of endorsements, because this is being live streamed, excuse me a second. Wow. And you told me too, didn't you, Freddie? Yeah, I did too. Oh my God. All right. I'm hearing a humming noise. That's going to bug me too. So, I've got way too much gear, and I can't sell it, and it's worth too much just to trade into the local music store to get that new pedal that I like. So I kind of keep it, and then, you know, at some point I use it to barter with people. But the point with that is that I've got everything I need. Like, I've got everything I need. I do not need any more gear. So anytime I've worked with a company on a product, it's because it fulfills a need for me that no product has had. So this guitar, for example, as cool as of a spaceship and everything as it is, it fulfilled a need for me that now, when I was recording the record, I don't need any other guitar. the pickups that are in this guitar fulfill a need. As I said earlier, I tend to use a telly when I'm at home or when I'm just jamming because it's disconnected from my job, and I psychologically really like that. And with the Fluence thing, I talked to, so it was Ken Susie, who's in Unearthed. And when we met at Ozfest, I was so fucked up and he was so fucked up, we just did not get along. Like, I was just like, I don't like this dude. And he was like, I don't like this dude. And now we're buddies and we work together. It's really cool. And so hey, Ken. And he called me up and he's like, Fluence is putting together this pickup. So I was like, well, I use the 81s and I'm happy with that. And he says, well, what about it don't you like? And I said, well, I'll tell you what I don't like. I can't do this clean sound that I'm doing right now with the 81s. It just doesn't work for me. So what we ended up doing was designing this Transcendence pickup, which is 2 voices. The way that the Fluence pickup works is it coil taps between 2 distinct voices that I had the opportunity to go to Boston with Fishman and voice. And I spent 6 months, I think, with Larry Fishman and Ken and their engineers going back. We did dozens and dozens of prototypes. And the idea was a pickup that I could do the same sort of idea that I have with, like, you know, whatever jamming guitar that I have on a guitar that also does crushing metal. And these pickups are the first ones that were able to actually have 2 distinct voices because they're not wound like a traditional pickup. They're actually layers of PCP. Fucking rock! The PCB, isn't it part? It's, you know, the other one. Yeah. So basically, it's layers of that, and so it's vertical windings, which allow us to basically program into it with consistency with each set 2 completely unique sounds. So on this guitar, I can go between, you know, this sort of thing with the real, you know, sort of touch sensitive, you know. But then when I go to the metal, it's, oh God, except usually I don't have to do it like this. Don't look at my balls. Right, this is, I do this live too. This is how I change patches. But then when I go to this, I just put it into the metal setting and we're back to... So, did you get that show here? Yeah. All right, didn't get the reactions look for, but thank you. So yeah, it was the first time I've had, and it solved a really practical need for me, where I can use one guitar live to do everything that I need to do, right? And it's the same with this guitar. And it's funny because I've been offered like a surprising amount of signature amp models, but I've not taken it because I'm fine with the Axe effects. You know what I mean? So that sort of, in a sense, it's like if I don't need it, then I'm not going to do like a signature product. It doesn't make sense because, like the Ocean Machine, for example, that Moore pedal that I did was perfect for me because today I took, you know, the Helix and the Kemper and I had to go through and make patches, and I'm like not completely satisfied with it, but it kind of gives a replication of what it is that I go for. So the Ocean Machine, I was like, I want that, so when I go to my parents' house at Christmas time, I can plug into their stereo with any guitar and get my effects sound. So it solved a very practical need for me, right? And yeah, they're really cool. The other thing I like about the Fishman pickups is that they're USB charged, so as they're active pickups, you know, between our lack of straws and the 6 batteries a year we'll save, that's the world sorted right there, man. Yeah. Coming to take me away. My friends, I will say first off that doing these sorts of things is exceptionally awkward because I don't have a lot to offer people in terms of guitar technique. You know, Andy James is a buddy, and like, you know, Petrucci and Vi and all these crazy guitar players, and when they do it, they're like, you know, I hold my pick like this, and this is how I do my sweeps, and blah 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 blah. But for me, I can't state clearly enough that guitar for me is a tool. It's a means to an end. And I use it, my capacity for technique is only there so I can articulate whatever ideas come into my mind. I have no passion for the technical side of it in the way that I maybe did when I was 15. So doing these guitar clinics is really weird because, you know, I keep thinking like, should I show you a chord? Like, I don't know, man, here's like that tapping lick I learned from Van Halen or whatever when I was 15. It's like, it's not my trip, but the one thing that I would hope that these sorts of things can impart on people is the fact that there's a real practical use for analysis of not only your physical and emotional health, but also how it relates to others in terms of how that can be translated into something musically that other people relate to. Because ultimately, if you're not honest with yourself about what you do, and if you're not honest with what your intentions are, this is what I find more than anything else, the amount of people that are going to be able to relate to that is going to be less than I think I had realized. And I think a lot of times I go through my, you know, I ramble and I talk and I get nervous and I do this and I just blah, 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 and scatological humor is a defense and all this sort of stuff. But I think ultimately what I've found is that at the end of it, even these experiences of trying to be more open allow people hopefully to see that that's an option viably, like creatively. And so I hope that from these clinics people can sort of see that, you know, it's okay just to be who you are. Fuck it. It doesn't matter. It's like, you know, look, man, I'm like 46-year-old bald guy with bad teeth playing prog metal. I mean, this is like, that's a gong show straight out of the gate, right? But ultimately, I think as long as you're coming at it from the point of view of like, well, that's who I fucking am, right? And it's like, people like, well, I want to be this band, like this band, because they're wicked and brutal, so I'll buy that guitar, you know what I mean? And I'll look like that, and I'll have the same sort of font. It's like, what you're doing is you're sacrificing the thing that makes you unique. And there's going to be tons of people that don't give a fuck about what makes you unique. I get so many people just like, this guy's a banana, you know? But ultimately, it's like the people that love me, and I love them, and I love doing what I do, and I've got a ton of friends that support me, and I've got musicians in a lot of genres that help me. And I think that if you're a musician and you are trying to make something of your own music, I think the best place to look is not, you know, necessarily the technique for guitar, because you can find a million YouTube videos that can do better than I can. But I think it's really about getting to the root of what it is that is bothering you. And in the same way I discussed with like the idea of a sculpture, you take away like Michelangelo, you took everything away from the piece of brick that, or whatever it was, that wasn't David, and then David was left over, right? I think it's the same thing we need to do as artists, right? Just observe the thing about us that is causing us to be consistently running into the same obstacles, and then just analyze that and see if you can live with it. If you can, great, make that part of your music, and if you can't, then change it, right? But ultimately, you know, just be honest with yourself, be honest with your friends, don't be afraid to be who you are, and, you know, drink milk. No, I don't know. All right, my friends, thank you so much for coming. If anybody would like a photo or yeah, if you want to try this guitar too, please just don't drop it.